Welcome to A Chat with Heart podcast. I'm your host, Christina Martin. I'm here to guide us on this journey of heartfelt and uncensored conversations with friends I've met while touring my music in Europe and across North America, and people who have life experience that I genuinely believe we can all learn from. Our personal stories have great power to heal, influence, and inspire. All we have to do is show up for the conversation. If we just talk about it, we could shine a light, we could break a dark day. If we just talk about it, we can cut away, we can make a brighter day. This Chat with Heart is for anyone who has ever had a collection, enjoys electric guitars, loves the book Moby Dick, is interested in the Cold War, espionage, or has a connection with the military. When I was a young girl, I had a few collections. There was my marble collection, my stuffed animal collection, my baby blanket collection, my Barbie collection, my music collection, bookmark collection, my pin collection, my baseball card collection, and then there was probably my most dedicated collection for an extended period of time, my stamp collection. I had stamps from all over the world because my dad sold stamps to pay the bills. I lean more towards being a minimalist these days, although I still have stuff, tools of my trade mostly. But I know this about collecting. It's usually about a sense of feeling connected to something. The stuff we collect is special because it reminds us of places and people we love. My grandmother's china cups and saucers and dishware remind me both of my grandmother and my mother, who were fantastic cooks and entertainers. Collecting stuff like souvenirs makes us feel connected on a global scale. I have a little ceramic whorehouse from a trip to Amsterdam in my hutch at home, and it takes me right back to all the times we've toured and performed in Amsterdam. Stories are oftentimes attached to the stuff we collect. Once my mother gave me a tennis bracelet that she bought on her trip to Italy when she was a young girl, a trip which I'm sure holds many fond memories for my mother, no doubt a time of adventure and few responsibilities. My guest on today's episode of A Chat with Heart is Chris Distin. He is a James Bond expert with one of the largest James Bond collections in Europe. I met Chris in 2013 at the Duesenberg guitar headquarters in Hanover, Germany, as he's part of their amazing team, crafting some of the best sounding and sexiest looking electric guitars on our planet. They also make basses, lap steels, amps, and electric guitar effects. I've known Chris for years and didn't even know he was a James Bond collector or expert. So it just goes to show, either I wasn't paying attention, or it takes a long time to get to know your friends. Chris is kind, high energy, hilarious. I love his positive attitude. And it turns out he's a great guy to have on your spy mission. He's got all the gear and the military experience. Look at you, a couple minutes early.
Hey, I was in the army, right? So it's always 5 minutes early instead of 5 minutes late, right?
Oh, yeah.
Which is also... Yeah.
Is the army how you ended up in Germany? You're from England.
Yeah, it is, yeah.
Okay, because with your accent, my listeners are going to be like, where the fuck is this guy from? Where'd she find this one?
Yeah, it was the army. I came over in 1989 to Germany.
Okay.
With the army, and that's what brought me here, and that's why, and then obviously... I liked Germany so much, and then I met my wife and we're still together, and so that's how I've been here ever since.
We met in 2013 at the Duesenberg Guitar headquarters, which is where you work, your day job. Explain for me for the 14th time what your job is there, because when Dale and I visit you at work in Hanover at the Duesenberg headquarters, you're usually not doing much, and I just can't figure it out. So...
Right. Well, what I tell everyone that I'm doing is I started at Duesenberg in 2011, And that's why when we met in 2013, you were one of the first sort of artists, because I got into artist relations around that time. So you were one of the first artists that I'd ever met in person. You know, you had a lot of contact via email, and we'd been to concerts and seen people, but this was the first sort of personal contact we'd had with anybody. So when I started on what we call the Plek machine, which is a machine that if we've got musicians listening, it's all about the fingerboard and the frets, and the machine mills the frets down to a perfect level so that when you play our guitars, they feel really good. The Plek machine comes from Germany as well. And when I started in the company, Duesenberg, it was pretty new. I mean, they'd had it since 2009, I think. That's when they really started. But 2010 was when they were really intensive. So I'd only got in like a year after they'd really started with the Plek machine. And now it's like everyday work. So that's where I started. It's, you know, it's sort of my department now. I'm sort of like head of department there now. And I then got into artist relations. So I'm a bit of everything now.
I will attest to like probably taking up 50% of your time with my useless emails.
More 80%, but it doesn't, okay. You know, it doesn't. But that's okay, you know. I've got nothing else to do.
I'm keeping you partially employed.
Well, nearly all of you.
Yeah, you're right. Employed. Okay, well, you know what though? I think there's a lot of really cool things. Jokes aside, For example, you've had the opportunity to custom design guitars for some of the world's biggest celebrities. Can you talk about that a little bit? Yeah,
I mean, part of the job is. At the beginning, when we were a bit smaller, now it's a bit more. We've grown over the years, but at the beginning, when I started there, it was all we were only like 10 people working in the company. Now we're over 46 or something, but it was a real, you know, tight, small family. And back then, it would be like there would be names being thrown around, you know. They need a guitar, and they need a guitar, and they need a guitar, and we're designing one for them. We're designing one for them. And I'd only been there a couple of months, and one of the first things, and it was like one of the most major names in rock history was going around, was we need a guitar for the Eagles.
No biggie.
Because it was, we'd already been working with Glenn and Glenn Fry and with Joe Walsh, you know, individually. But Glenn came and actually wanted, you know, a new guitar and wanted something extra made for him. And Ingo, the CEO of Duesenberg, was sitting in his office, and he was going, and I think he sort of said it loud. He said, "Oh man, if anybody's got an idea for the Eagles, yeah." So I went home and knocked something up on, you know, really bad graphic program, but I had this idea in my head. I went home, I jotted a few things down. I went in a couple of days later, and I said, "This is sort of an idea that we could, you know, maybe go for." And he was like, "That's brilliant. Let's look at that." Then you start going into things like, you know, what color, how to get certain things done. There's like wings at the bottom. How do you get these wings put on? So we went to see a sprayer, an air sprayer, you know, an airbrusher. How can you get it 3D sprayed on there? That didn't work out properly. So at the end, we used like a 3D kind of layering that we then sprayed over. Anyway, so that's how these things work. And at the end, basically it got used. I mean, my design got used, and I didn't really fathom what had happened because I was so new in the company, and it was like, oh, this is what they do here, right? This is what happens. You just go in and say, hey, this is an idea I've got for the Eagles. And then, you know, it gets made. And I was like, when it got finished, and when we had the first ones came in from our lacquer department, and it was like, this is what they look like. And I was like, right, that was when it started to sink in that the Eagles had never had their own signature edition. So basically, I think that's part of why it went so well, because I wasn't thinking about it, you know, it just came. So basically, I designed and Duesenberg made the only signature guitar that the Eagles had ever said they wanted and will ever want, because obviously Glenn Frey's now died, unfortunately. So when I look back at it now and I go, that's pretty good. And I've got one in my hallway hanging up in a glass case, because that was like, you know, a pretty major achievement for me, you know, and it still is. I mean, I still, you know, walk past it every day and go, yeah, just, you know, can't believe it.
Chris, apart from working the Plek machine at Duesenberg, playing bagpipes, being in a band called Moby's Dick,
Yeah.
you have the specific expertise. And I asked you to be on this podcast because you are a shining example of how a passion project can turn into something that just brings so much joy in the world. So I want to chat about this very specific expertise that you're known for. You are a James Bond expert and you have a very extensive James Bond collection. So tell us about how you got started. Like, why James Bond? Why not Coronation Street?
Well, do everybody know Coronation Street, who we're talking to out there?
Oh, it's, yeah.
Oh, is it big? Is it? I don't know.
It's huge. Oh, yeah, it's huge here. My friend sells Coronation Street mugs down the road here.
No way. That's amazing. Because I haven't seen it for like 25 years. But why not Coronation Street? Why James Bond? Okay, well, I can tell you why James Bond.
Yeah.
Started as a teenager, or was 11, 12, 13 years old, sat on the sofa. I remember this, sat on the sofa at home. I was living with my Gran.
How come you were living with your Gran?
My mum and dad were divorced, and my brothers were living with my mum. When they divorced, when they split up, I was given to my Gran to sort of say, look, we need to get a lot of shit sorted out. So could you look after him while we, like my dad, you know, he said, oh, look, I need to get I need to get a flat. I need to get a place.
Yeah.
Can you look after him? And she'd raised 9 kids. So she knew what she was doing.
Yeah.
So I stayed with her. And, you know, as these things happen through life, I just stayed with her, you know. So I stayed with my Gran, and I grew up separately from my brothers. But they, you know, afterwards, my mum, you know, sort of said she didn't want to take me out of my comfort zone again. You know, I'd grown up there and I knew no difference. It was, I was, you know, 7, 8, and it was weird for me. You know, I didn't know all these things. When you're like 8 years old, you don't fathom what's going on.
Sure, yeah.
So we sat on the sofa. My Gran used to let me stay up obviously longer. Yeah, that's what Grans do, right? Yeah, I remember Moonraker coming on the TV, and you know, Star Wars had just been out. Moonraker's 1979, so Star Wars 77. We were all Star Wars fans, and of course Moonraker, James Bond. It came on the TV around 1981. Then in England, it normally take about 2 years, 3 years before it get on to terrestrial TV. But so I would have been about 12 years old watching James Bond. It blew me away, man. You know, it was like this guy, it saves the world, gets all the girls, gets the best gadgets, got the fastest cars. For a teenage boy, that was, well, it was something that was different to the province village that I was living in southwest England. And it was so far away, you know, it was, even London was far away, you know. So James Bond was just out of this, you know, out of this world. That's actually one of the slogans from Moonraker. But anyway, so that's what really fixed me at that time was seeing Roger Moore, you know, as James Bond, you know, having a bit of a laugh as well, because obviously Sean Connery, I didn't know at that time. Roger Moore was the Bond that I knew, and he's still one of my favorite, really, with Daniel Craig. But so that happened, and that sort of really, to be honest, was one of the reasons why I was in the army, because it was like,
I knew it. I knew it. Yes.
You know, it's like, you know, this agent guy traveling around the world, seeing all these different places, having adventures, killing the baddies. Yeah. And it was a little bit of that, you know. I was already in like the army cadets, which was like the scouts, you know, or the cubs for soldiers, you know. And so 13, 12, 13, 14, I was sort of like this army cadet. So that sort of pushed me as well a bit more. But, you know, the reason, you know, at the end of the day was
sex. It was sex.
Well, it was the cars, girls. And the sex. And
the hope of sex someday.
And the hope of sex and alcohol. I wanted to be like James Bond and become an alcoholic. So, but, you know, so
a high functioning, super high functioning. Amazing. So how old were you when you started your collection?
I've been collecting now for about 22 years. So that started when I was, you know, about 27, 28. only because that was the sort of time when eBay was big, just started to get really big, eBay.
Yeah.
And I remember I had an autograph of Michael Schumacher. I bought it somewhere for really cheap, and I sold it for quite good money in England. And I thought, wow, this autographs and that. So I started looking, and one day, while I was looking for autographs, this thing popped up, and it was Jaws, the big baddie with the many teeth.
Oh yeah.
And
was it his teeth? Could you buy his teeth?
No, it was an autograph. It was an autograph of him with Dolly, his little girlfriend with the ponytails.
Right. Yeah.
And there was a double signed autograph, and I thought that would look so cool on my wall. And obviously, being a big Bond fan, it was like, right, I'm going to get that. So I bought it, and I put it up in the hallway, and they look great. People came round, and I'd go, look, this is Jaws. This is Jaws's autograph. And then, of course, I said, it's a bit lonely, so why don't I try and get Roger Moore, because that was my Bond, So I had looked round, and it just went on from there. And all of a sudden, I had about 50 or 60 signed photographs, all up on the wall of all different, of all the different Bond people, and all the Bond actors, the girls. And while I was always looking for new autographs, something came up, and it was a sticker from a film, and I thought, and it was like £10 or something. It was really cheap, and I thought, that's from the film. It's an original thing from the film, and that's really where it started. And then you start looking, and you start, as any collector will tell you, you start looking and looking. It's now one of the largest collections in Europe.
So, Chris, I've seen some of your collection in the Spy Museum in Berlin. Can you tell us about all the places that the public can access your collection? And then tell us about the collection you have in your home, which I can see some of it behind you in some specially lit cases.
So the Spy Museum in Berlin, it's where most of it used to be. And we swapped a lot around, but there's about 40 or 50 items in there, but major items, like Bond's gun and costumes and gadgets from the films and stuff. That's in Berlin, that you can go and see as part of the Spy Museum Berlin, because it's all about the Cold War, about spying over the ages. And at the top, they've got the fictional area where James Bond and film spies are, where they've accentuated that. So that's there. And here at home, I've got the rest of the collection. Here in my Bond room, I call it, which is part dining room, part Bond room. I've got my glass cabinets lit up, and I've got a lot of pictures on the wall. But it's more like every year I do an exhibition somewhere in Germany, and most of my collection is then shown there, apart from the stuff that's in Berlin. I'm actually part of a project every year in Brunswick, is a place where a friend of mine and an author, Danny Morgenstern, he writes James Bond books, and I work together with him on a lot of projects. And he has a project every year called Mission Bond, and that's sort of a similar kind of vibe. He has like different things going on, and I do an exhibition in the big like central bank there. There's a big foyer, a massive foyer. We've had, my collection there. There's been cars there. There's been like the DB5 was there a couple of years ago. There's so many facets to James Bond. Some people buy the clothes that Bond wears, and they shed loads of money wearing the stuff that he wears because they want to feel like Bond like that. Some other people will collect, cars, model cars or anything with 007 written on it.
Yeah.
Everybody's got their sort of area. Yeah. And mine was the original props, which were used in the films. That was sort of my sort of gate to being a part of the Bond universe that made me so excited as a child, and still does.
If you told Dale and I that you had Jaws's teeth, we would think that was pretty cool. So tell us one or two of your props that might really impress like someone who knows Bond but isn't like a hardcore, would just love anything. I see there's a cool gun right behind your head.
That is one of the guns from the new film, from No Time to Die.
No way!
Yeah, it's the gun that Bond uses in Jamaica when he's in his flat there, and he goes and he puts it in the drawer. That's the Browning. It's a Browning pistol, and it's a stunt pistol, and that's one of the ones from the new film. I had that a few months before the film, came out. Obviously, it was delayed, but I had it like basically pretty much after filming had wrapped.
How?
These are contacts you build up over the years,
Okay.
And these guys sort of call me now and say, Chris, I've got this. Do you want it or not? I can offer it to someone else.
Do they give you a good deal, or are they trying to make money?
Everybody's making money.
Okay.
Everybody's trying to make money. But I do have, I have a couple of good friends, and it's not just about making money.
My father became a stamp dealer and collector. My father was pretty good at learning how to make money out of something, anything, and he had different businesses throughout his life. I would work for him, oftentimes, and I had my own stamp collection, and he would take the time to explain to me why things were unique or special, and he had special fluorescent lights, it was really fascinating and interesting. And no one else I knew, in like my friends or anything, had stamp collections. And my dad was hardcore into it, and he had customers all around the world. And so I can totally see the appeal in collecting and the hunt, the search, and then the community that he built. Like, he would have customers that would, write him letters, and sometimes I would read them, or he would read them to me. And these were people from all over the world. It was really exciting.
I collected stamps as a child. There
we go, Chris. This is actually why, without even realizing it, we are so connected.
Yes, right. So I collected stamps. So I started off with a small album, and that also got quite big, the collection of stamps.
Yeah.
For the money I had, I was just using my pocket money.
In preparing for this chat with Hart, I asked you to send me 5 James Bond movies. You sent me 6 to watch. So I had a lot of homework. I made some notes, and I thought we could run through these films that you had me spend a lot of my life watching.
I wanted you to see at least one film from every Bond.
Yeah.
At least see the range from the 60s up until now, because you've seen No Time to Die now.
Yeah.
Right? So from the 1960s films all the way up to now, then you've got the whole spread of all the eras that he's gone through. So anyway, that's why I gave you them.
Let's take a little Fluster break. My friends Julie and Franz visited me recently, and we loved reconnecting with this Canadian creation, the conversation game Fluster. So right now, I'll share one of the Fluster questions and our answers, and you'll find these sprinkled throughout season 1 of the podcast. My little heartbeat listeners, you can buy the game at www.flustergame.com and save 15% with my promo code Christina15. Franz, do you want to go first and ask the first Fluster question? Okay.
What's an assumption you once had about adult life that turned out to not be true?
I thought that the ideal relationship was me having like an apartment and my partner having a separate apartment across town, and like we wouldn't have to live together and wouldn't be married or anything. And I thought that was the only way that it could work. But it turns out that you can actually live with somebody and like really love them and have a healthy relationship.
And be committed to just one person?
Yeah, that's a thing too. That I definitely realized. And I thought, oh, that's cool.
That's a good one, Christina.
Thanks.
Julie?
Don't do that to me.
What did she do? What did she do?
Put me on the spot.
She's not,
I told you guys not to do that.
She's not putting you on the spot. We're here. We each have a microphone. We know what the expectation. We know what the expectation is. But yet it was really scary. It was shocking. She just shocked you, but
she did. She just got me flustered.
That was beautiful. Franz,
okay.
What about you?
I think that I thought one day I'm going to wake up and I'm going to feel different. Like I'm going to feel, I don't know if I expected like a light switch moment where I would feel like an adult. But I just feel the same way I've always felt. I feel like inside I'm the same person I was when I was like a teenager.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, interesting.
I often have that thought too, where you just feel like I'm still 20 in this 42-year-old body.
Yes.
I should have so much more wisdom, so much more experience. I still have so much learning to do,
Yeah.
so much growing to do. And now we're in the situation where we're raising children and we should be showing the way, or we're still learning the way a lot of the time.
And I remember my parents, like when they turned 40 and we had this big party, and I remember how old I was, and then I turned 40, and I feel like my parents were so much older than I was at that. I don't know. It's just strange. It just, there was no light switch moment for me. So that was I
had a light switch moment when I turned 6. My 6th birthday. I looked at myself in the mirror and I remember what dress I was wearing. It was kind of like a sporty but pink dress, and I had long hair down my back. And I had a birthday party that day, and I remember thinking, here she is, like, I've arrived, I'm now a woman, I can reach the taps and like turn the water on myself. And it probably wasn't a big difference from the day before, but yeah, I remember that feeling like I am grown up now.
That's interesting. And you were 6.
I remember that.
Well, that's probably when you started watching horror movies.
Right, because that would have been around when the VCRs, the beta machines were, you could buy them, and my dad would have bought them, and we would have had access to all these, grown-up movies in the house, and so.
I watched some of the scariest movies at your house as a kid.
Sorry. Red Rob.
Yeah, I lost a lot of sleep after some of my sleepovers at your place.
Okay, so we're going to start with the first one that I watched was Goldfinger with Sean Connery.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm just going to run through my notes here. Well, first I do have a little quiz question for you.
Okay.
I bet you're going to nail this one. Okay, so in the first fight scene, Goldfinger, what did James Bond say after he electrocuted some random dude in a bathtub?
Shocking.
Yeah, positively
shocking, right?
shocking.
Yeah, positively shocking. Yeah.
Good one. Here's another one. And I don't know the answer to this, so anything you say will be, but some of the listeners might and will be curious. Okay, when James Bond is first seen with Q, the inventor dude, what are the modifications that were made to the Aston Martin?
Right, well, the ones that are in the film are the bulletproof shield at the back.
Okay, yeah, I remember that.
There's a tracker inside, which was the blueprint for a GPS, really, when you think about it.
Oh,
so there's a tracker with the map in there.
Yeah.
Then there's obviously the ejector seat with the button. Then there's machine guns. There's also meant to be a smoke screen, which we never saw, but it was in the concepts were a smoke screen. And I think an all slick, but anyway. So
what about? I thought this was one.
Oh, the wheels, the wheel knives that come out.
Oh yeah, those are cool. But no, there's one more. I think it's like the rotating license plate.
Oh yeah, Christ, yeah. So I nearly even bought one of them once. I nearly bought.
Oh, that is cool.
Rotating number plate, which you could fit onto your car, because I thought that would be cool. You just get through every light and go through every camera, and then rotate it back. Okay,
well, that was good, though. I mean, you missed that one, I think. But again, I don't remember the answers, so that all could have been correct. Okay, this is just sort of a general question. Is James supposed to be the same person in all these movies? Are we supposed to believe as the viewer that this guy, it's the same guy every single movie?
Yes,
it's a different time.
It is. Okay. James Bond is James Bond, right? James Bond is the figure that was invented by Ian Fleming, and in the books he was described, as this white male with a big scar down his face, which they didn't use in the film, but that's James Bond is James Bond. So in every film, they just had to revamp him, because obviously Connery finished his films, and they had to find a new Bond, right? So that's why they tried to use the same people in the background to make it more believable when it was a reboot, to make sure that it was
like
the same.
M and Moneypenny. Okay.
Q.
Yeah.
So they're always the same Q, the same Moneypennies, the same M's until they obviously died or had to or moved on. But that's why they did that. But it is the same guy. Yeah, it's the same James Bond in every film. Yeah.
Gotcha. Do we know the story of how he got into this line of work?
Well, it's all in the books. It's
God, I don't have time.
No, I don't. But you know what? I've only read a few of the books. I was always the film freak, and I know bits of it. But it's he went to university, and his parents had died in a skiing accident, which was themed in Skyfall.
Yeah.
And Spectre, when there was a lot of things that came up then that his parents had died.
Okay,
the Daniel Craig films were a whole row, and they were all fitted in together, whereas each other Bond film was a film for itself. Okay. So that's why. But he was an orphan basically, and orphan people, orphaned boys are generally the ones that they said are looked for in the Secret Services because they have nobody, so that's why he got into that line of work.
Very good. Okay. Let's go back to Goldfinger here. So, okay, Chris, James in this movie, Goldfinger, he doesn't actually achieve anything, right? Like you saw the part where he couldn't even deactivate a bomb, like some dude saved his ass last minute. He gets a trip to the White House, but yet he didn't really deactivate the bomb himself. But he did kill Oddjob. But like, I was just kind of watching it going, I mean, he looks really good and he's in every scene, but like, how come he didn't give credit to all the people that helped him? I was just like, what did he do?
Do you do that? Do you go onto stage and go, right, before I sing this next song, I mean,
I thank people every chance I get. Yes.
Well, you do. No, you do. You thank a lot of people, but I mean, is that something you do? I know where you're coming from, but I mean, he did. He found out about Operation Grand Slam. I mean, he found out that Fort Knox was going to be targeted and all this. So, I mean, he's a British agent, man. And do you know what? One of the things and it's quite hard because in my in the branch of James Bond, people get very, very emotional about everything, and they get very how can I say it? Uptight's probably not the right word, but they get very they're very emotional about it. And for me, James Bond was always an entertainment, right?
Yeah. So, that
you can go into
achieved. He achieved that.
If you can watch a film, if you can watch one of the James Bonds and be entertained and come out at the end, and James Bond saved the world again. He got the girl. He got to drive loads of really fast cars, jump out of planes, and do all this. Then, hey, you come out of the cinema and you go, hey, man, James Bond saved the world again. So that was point of, every James Bond film, whether Bond himself was the leading thing in all of the, there was a lot of films where he wasn't the one alone, that saved the world. But, at the end, everybody goes, Bond saved the world, yeah?
Yeah, it's true. And, I wonder what my impression would have been at that time. I probably wouldn't have thought so much into this, but like when I was watching this as my first Bond movie here, as part of this assignment, my question was, is this guy really a spy? Because in the pool scene, he literally stands right next to the two men that he is, quote unquote, spying on. And he quite obviously is staring directly at them from 2 feet away. And I just thought, that is not something a spy would do. Yeah. But it was so hilarious, like watching now. But wait, one other favorite scene of mine was when like Goldfinger gets sucked out of the tiny plane window that's like 1/10 his size. Yeah. That was hilarious, I thought. And no, this was another one. I love the Miami scene by the pool. Bond gets a massage by Dink, and then he slaps her on the ass and says, "Man talk." And then he puts on this immediately after. He goes over and he zips up this little, like, I don't know, baby blue one-piece bodysuit with a little tiny latch belt. He's like, man talk. And then he puts on that suit. I thought that was, I was definitely being entertained.
Well, I mean, that's a big thing. What everybody's talking about now is Bond has changed so much because you can't even. We all grew up with that, right? We grew up with Sean Connery slapping some girl's ass while she walked past the pool, or Roger Moore slapping a girl in the face, or and it's all. I know, times change and things are different now, but we can go over the top, right? And Daniel Craig, even though he's one of my favorite Bonds, I think actually said in an interview that he wanted to take out the womanizing part of Bond out of the films and make him more. He had obviously 2 relationships. He had one with Vesper and now with Madeleine, and it wasn't just the let's go to Vegas and sleep with a girl for a night, and it's I get I get where we're going now, and I get where where times change and everything's different, but Bond's still Bond, right? And it's still it's a spy movie, and I'm not saying women should be slapped, but it's just
some people enjoy like not everybody. Okay, so Bond's in a committed relationship until with. I'm still not exactly sure. We're jumping ahead here, but I'm still not exactly sure. Vespa did screw him over, but they were still in love.
I mean, she did fall in love with him, and I think she screwed him over
to save
the other love, and but she didn't know it screwed her over. But she still falling in love with Bond as well, and that's why the end is quite is sadder than you think, because you think she won him over. But I suppose that's.
Well, my point is that there are people like myself. I'm a serial monogamist, I guess, and then there are people who aren't, and they may still want that to see that kind of a bond that is kind of a little more open to one night stands, and it's exciting, and there's all kinds of people that aren't into just being with one person. So I think a lot of people want that, but people are scared now to say anything, right? Because it's the new movements are like, and I don't know, maybe I'll start a shitstorm just by saying it here, I personally think it's all just a film, right? And there's other films where people sleep with each other, or a woman gets kidnapped or slapped or whatever, and it's just Bond is just Bond, and we just got to see it as a bit of fun that it is, and without obviously making women a piece of meat, but they can do it as they've tried to make the women more strong in these newer films, to make them more independent, which they are, and equal representation.
And I suppose if Bond sleeps with a more independent woman, then she's made that choice, which is, I think that's what it's all about at the end, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I think that was it. But I mean, back in Connery's time, there was one or two scenes where that was pretty hard on, being forced, that was, but back then nobody blinked an eyelid,
Yeah. Okay. So The Spy Who Loved Me with Roger Moore. This was my first time seeing Roger Moore playing Bond. By this time, I figured it out. Spy gets a mission. This is in my mind. Okay, this is what's going on in every movie. I think Spy gets a mission, has lots of intercourse along the way. Some of it's consensual. Bad guys usually involved in some kind of nuclear mission. The horny spy MacGyver's his way into saving the day, and he looks good throughout the entire mission.
Hey, you should write the new script.
Thank you.
Hey, because that is exactly what a Bond film was, right?
Thank you.
And still is in a certain sense, but that was what a Bond film was, wasn't it?
I think so. I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong either. Like you become a fan of the formula, and you want to expect it, and then it's all the other things, like the places that you travel to, the cinematography, the new characters that are a surprise element. Like in this one, I don't know if this was the first one where Jaws appears. It is, okay? Yeah. The only thing I want to know from this film is, where are his teeth? Who has his teeth in the world?
Well, they're in the archives at Eon. There was one set made. They were specially made for him. I have a set of replicas here. I have the set that was taken off the set, the original set. So they are like a 1-to-1 cast.
Okay,
of
that's
the
cool.
teeth. And there's quite an interesting story behind them. The teeth were obviously made of metal, and they were made from a cast, from like you do in the dentist. And Jaws, when you see Jaws in The Spy Who Loved Me and in Moonraker, He's always got like this. The face looks like really intense and like screwed up, scrunched together.
Yeah.
But that's not because he's trying to look bad or like a baddie. It's because these teeth were giving him hell. First of all, they're made of metal, right? And if you've got fillings, you can imagine what this is doing to your fillings in your teeth, right? When you've got metal coming against them. That was number one. Number two was at the top of the up teeth, the teeth at the top. There's the thing that goes up on the roof of your mouth.
Your palate,
There was the palate. There's a whole plate that pressed against his palate and made him feel sick every time you put the teeth in.
Oh
so
my God!
You'll only see jaws like for the space of like seconds, like 20 seconds at the most, in one cut, because he couldn't bear to have the teeth in for longer. So he put the teeth in just before they shouted action. Then he'd do the thing and he'd take them straight out. He said it felt awful. I saw interviews with him. I spoke to him in person a few, before he died back in 2009. I think I met Richard Keel, who played Jaws, and that was like his. That was the problem he had with them teeth. So anyway, they're in Eon. I've got a set of replicas. They made a run of replicas, and they're really good. I still put them in the exhibition because that's a real good story to tell people, because they don't know that, they don't know why he looked like that, and they didn't know he was in agony every time he put these teeth in. But there's another little story to go with Jaws's teeth, and it's all to do with a thing called the Mandela Effect. The Mandela Effect is when you think something's happened and you're sure that it did, but it definitely didn't. Now, for instance, Dolly, his little girlfriend,
who we meet in Moonraker, which is the next film I watched. So let's go on to that. Yeah.
So Dolly, when she smiles, when she first meets him, a lot of people think that she had braces in. We're also with metal, the metal braces on your teeth.
Yeah.
Do you think she had braces on?
Come to think, I don't remember. I just remember her ponytails or her braids.
Because the first time she meets him is when he crashes down in Rio in the cable car, right? And she comes and helps him out. And then he looks at her and she looks at him. He smiles at her with his big metal teeth and she smiles back at him.
Yeah. I don't remember.
And so many people think that she had braces on her teeth because that would have been such a good effect.
Yeah. And
she also had metal in her mouth, but she didn't. And even I thought that she did. For years, and it's called the Mandela Effect, and it's called it's loads of things have happened like this. And if you put that into YouTube, the Mandela Effect, there'll be like loads of cases, and one of them is the Jaws teeth scenario. Fun fact, yeah.
That is a fun fact. Okay, so Moonraker, which was the first Bond movie that you saw with your Gran.
Yeah, that's why I said you had to watch that, because that is the one that started everything. Yeah.
Moonraker, I made a note. I like this one as an example of the power of love to change evil for the greater good. I mean, look what happened with Jaws. He gets a girlfriend. I mean, I never would have expected that. And then at the end of this one, he ends up helping Bond, right? Yeah. Do we see him again later? I can't remember. He and Dolly, they just disappear and we don't ever.
Yeah, but we that's one of the things people speculate. But when Bond says, "Oh, they got on one of the capsules, they'll be okay," then that's it. That's okay. They're okay.
Yeah.
They go on to live happily ever after and have loads of children with metal teeth. So
that's what I thought.
But that's obviously that was also one of the first things that tried to show people that not being perfect is okay, because Moonraker was he was trying to make the new race, the new blonde. It was a bit Aryan, wasn't it? But
yes, it was. Well, and that was a reflection of history, really. I mean, that's one thing I liked I loved about the James Bond movies was it seemed like they were always trying to, bring up themes and deal with themes. So like another way for people to possibly process all these heavy things that are happening in the world, either that are happening like were happening like the Cold War at the time,
yes,
or things that people were maybe told might happen in the future, and then you could
definitely. And that is one of the things that they always look at is how what's now, and of course we'll come to it later, but that's one of the themes from the last film, which was obviously more than ahead of its time. But we'll talk about it when we get there. But
okay,
anyway,
we're getting there. We're getting there soon, but I had a little bit of trouble with the Living Daylights. This is the one with Timothy Dalton.
Yeah.
Was not my favorite Bond. Although out of the movies up until then that I had seen, this one had the most believable fight scene in the kitchen. And I was like, okay, I'm impressed by this fight scene. The others were a little campy, but still entertaining. But I just found that some of the location shots and the length of the battles or the fights or whatever, I was like, I just kept losing my attention span. Was like, what's going on? Why are they still fighting? What are they fighting for?
So I can tell you as well, Timothy Dalton was not one of my favorite Bonds as well, but he was the first Bond to be closer to the novels than any of the others.
Okay.
He was a gritty, had his own, he wasn't the suave, sophisticated, that sign, the Roger Moore type. He was more edgy and more rough, and the fights, as you said, and it was all about him having his own mind and not just being a machine. And that's what a lot of people like about the Dalton films, which I can understand, and it's okay. It's not one of my favorites either, but like I said, it was important that you saw that facet of the Bond franchise as well, because it's not just all about Roger Moore and Sean Connery, where people think, or Daniel Craig. So that was a reason behind that. I also found it too much, going from one to the other. It was a bit too mixed up and
disconnect.
Stuff. And then, and then of course, the Mujahideen was there, which was obviously thing back then. It was, that was the forerunner of the Taliban, and they were on our side back then. They were fighting against the Russians. And another thing that you can see the political changes through Bond films as well. You can see that, and that's quite weird to see over the years. Yeah.
Okay, then we took a huge leap to Casino Royale and Daniel Craig, which I kind of appreciated because I really love Daniel Craig. I mean, so does Dale. We both do. They play a lot of cards in this one. That was a note that I made. I didn't get too in depth, obviously. And then this is the first one where I saw Bond's heart being broken, and then my heart was broken for him because I was like, yeah, that would sting. I didn't see that one coming either, And then I actually felt like an emotional connection for the first time.
Casino Royale was what they call a reboot, right? So basically, Bond started again. Yeah, it's the same Bond as we saw in the last films. I mean, Pierce Brosnan was Bond, but then Daniel Craig come in, and it's what they call a reboot because they started again at the beginning. So he started as a 00 agent, as you've seen at the beginning, and that's where all his films go through until, what happens at the end. Casino Royale was the savior of the Bond franchise, as far as I'm concerned. Pierce Brosnan's Bonds were, not good. GoldenEye was good, and then they started, and then they died another day, and it was just getting worse and worse. It was all plasticky, and it's really hard to explain. When they announced Brosnan as Bond, I thought it would be brilliant.
Yeah, me too.
I knew him as Remington Steele, and that was a typical Bond for me. The way he looked. He got dealt bad scripts, as far as I'm concerned. They didn't do him justice. He could have done a lot, but he could have pulled a lot more out of the role than he had. He acted well, that I thought. And then Daniel Craig just really booted it into the next phase. So Daniel Craig, amazing. Casino Royale, amazing film. Yeah. Really showed us where we could go with this franchise.
No Time to Die. I cried.
So did I.
I was going to ask you. Oh my! Did you know? Did you know that was going to happen?
No, nobody knew. Nobody knew. And I knew a lot of stuff beforehand. I had a lot of paperwork beforehand. I knew a lot of stuff. Nobody knew it was going to happen. I sat in the world premiere in the Royal Albert Hall in London with, I don't know how many people fit in there, but it's got to be about 8,000 to 10,000 people, right, in the Royal Albert Hall, and everybody was shocked. Everybody.
Were they crying? Like, what were they? Could you hear people crying, or like, what was going on?
people shocked, and I mean, tears were coming down my cheek, and I went, "What have they done? What have they done?"
Yeah, that's
I looked at Danny. I was there with Danny that I told you about earlier, and I was sat there, and I looked at him, and I said, "No." And we thought, something's going to happen now. Of course, we waited until right at the end when all the credits had gone through, and right at the end it goes, "James Bond will return," and then everybody cheered. They're going to reboot again. They're going to reboot again. They're going to this is the thing in the Bond community is, so there's going to be a reboot of where he's either really young, because Bond, I mean, Daniel Craig was, when he started 2006, I mean, it's 15 years ago now. And he was, he's 50, I don't know, he's 54 now. So he was about 39 then. So if they get somebody younger, they get somebody, beginning of 30, then they could do a young Bond, and then they can reboot, right? They can start again, or they go back and they do a period film like in the 60s or the 70s in the Cold War. If they did that, then you'd have kind of like all the old cars and old buildings.
Oh, that'd
and they
be
could do
so
that.
cool. Yeah.
So we don't know, but I mean, that's where it could go.
Do you have any other props from No Time to Die?
Well, the gun up there, and I've got a gun and a holster down here.
Okay.
Was from,
couple guns,
from Primo. Primo, the guy with the eye, the robot eye.
Yeah, do you have his eye?
No, I don't have his eye.
That's okay.
I wish I did have his eye, but I didn't.
Me too.
So I've got his holster and his gun. So there's a lot of weaponry knocking about. But apart from that, No Time to Die. No, it was. There's nothing on the market. They really clamped down on anything leaving the studios. So it's harder for collectors, but they don't want people like making money off their stuff, So
yeah, I get it.
I get where they're coming from.
Hey, Chris.
Yeah.
One of my little heartbeat listeners sent me some questions for you about James Bond. Or can I ask you them?
Oh, no worries. Yeah, of course. That's quite cool. Yeah, I didn't.
Actually, it's a quiz. These are
okay.
They know the answers, and this is from our little heartbeat listener, Melissa, in Cole Harbour, Nova Scotia.
Right. Okay.
What was the character's name of the Turkish head of the British Secret Service station in Istanbul in From Russia with Love?
Is it Kerim Bey?
Yeah, Ali Kerim Bey.
Yeah,
you got it. Good. Okay. There's 4 questions. Is it 1 for 4? What, how do you say? 1 out of 4. Correct. Okay.
Right. Okay.
What did bad guy Emilio Largo keep in his pool at his home in Thunderball?
Sharks, obviously.
Yeah. Duh.
Sharks.
I didn't even watch it, and I knew that. No.
Yeah.
What did Bond run across to escape from on a mini island in the bayou in Live and Let Die?
Well, that's the crocodiles, and that was that. Do you know what? That was actually a stuntman that actually did that. But it wasn't. No, it wasn't a stuntman. It was the guy who owned the crocodile farm.
But aren't they the backs of alligators, not crocodiles?
Oh, is it alligators in? Well, okay, yeah. I suppose it is. Yeah.
I mean, it's not wrong, Chris. I suppose. Okay. I don't even know the difference between the crocodile and an alligator.
The guy that did it, the farm, the crocodile farm, was owned by a guy called Ross Kananga.
Okay.
And the guy that runs across the backs of them alligators. Sorry, alligators. Yeah. Sorry, Melissa. Alligators is Ross Kananga, and they found it so great that he did that they actually named the baddie in the film after him. That's why the guy in the film Live and Let Die is called Mr. Big and Kananga. Oh,
that's so cool. Okay, one more from Melissa. What does M leave to Bond in her will in Skyfall?
It's Jack the Bulldog.
Yeah. What was the significance of that? I don't know.
Well, she had it on his. Well, I can tell you the story behind Jack the Bulldog.
Please do. Yeah.
So Jack the Bulldog was on her desk, and he hated it. He said, "Oh, I've always hated that." And at the end, she obviously, when it gets blown up, it's on her desk like glued together, and she knew he sort of didn't really like it, and that's why she sent him that in a box in some black tissue paper to say, yeah, this is what you really hated, so I'm going to let you have it. But the story behind that is the real boss of MI6 is called C. And ever since MI6 came to be back in, I think it was just after the war, I think, or it was in the war, there's always been one of these bulldogs, Jack the Bulldogs, in his office. And it still is. So in the head of MI6's office is always a Jack the Bulldog on the desk.
Oh,
and
wow.
there's also a bit larger one in the canteen of MI6. So that's Judi Dench, who plays M, went to MI6, was invited to had a look round, and she saw that on the desk of the boss of MI6, who still signs his name C in, I think it's purple ink when he signs. But anyway, she saw that and she said to the director, I want one of them on my desk on the next film. So that's why.
That is a cool fact. Thanks, Chris.
Anyway, so anyway, this is all very very factish, isn't it? It's not. It's a talk about heart, right? It's a
chat with heart. You know what? It's time for a chat with heart, Chris.
Right. Okay. Let's go more hearty then.
Okay. So as you know, Chris, it's part of my mission with this podcast to be a safe place to share stories about pivotal moments in our lives that make you who you are today. And I mean, from what I was hearing at the beginning of this chat, one very pivotal thing that happened in your life was moving in with your Gran when you were young, and of course that you experienced first Bond film with her. But can you chat about maybe some of the other pivotal experiences in your life that made you who you are today?
Well, definitely that was one of the things that you don't realize as a child, how much it affects you in a sense. Back then you don't really realize what something's happening, especially in my age. I was, back then when my mum and dad split up, I was 18 months old. That's why, he said to my Gran, oh, can you have a look after him? My mum was living on Ibiza at the time with my grandparents who'd emigrated there. Yeah.
That's the dance capital of like the world.
Well, it never used to be. Back in the 1970s and 60s when, my family emigrated there, it was a small Spanish island with lots of little tiny towns. It became the dance capital in the 80s.
Like, was it a beautiful place though?
Oh yeah, my gran said it was. I mean, even when I went there, the times I went there, it's still a beautiful island. There's only the party towns where you knew that the parties were going on, where all the tourists go, but there's still a lot of beautiful places on the island. But back then, she said there was nothing. She said there was little harbours and fishermen going out and catching fish. I'll tell you a quick story about Ibiza, what it used to be like when my gran moved over in 1967 or what it was. She said she went over there and her and my granddad were down on a beach one day having like a picnic, and two boys came along and were trying to sell them Coca-Cola. And my gran said to this boy, are you allowed to be selling stuff on this beach? And he said, yes, I am. And she said, oh, why is that then? And he said, because this beach belongs to me. Because all the children back in the olden days on these islands, the youngest sons got the land next to the sea because it was worth nothing. The first sons used to get the land in the island where you could grow crops or keep your wild stock, but there was all the beach, and all the sand was worth nothing. You couldn't do anything with it. So then these boys became millionaires overnight because they owned all the stuff next to the sea.
Incredible.
And I went 33 years later to a restaurant on this beach where the first meeting she had with my granddad, and there was a restaurant up on the side, and it was the little boy that tried to sell my gran the Coca-Cola. No. And he had a restaurant, and he was running this restaurant on the beach. So there you go.
No, that is beautiful.
So that's why they were on Ibiza, and I get taken home by my father. He gives me to her gran, and I then stay with her. They came back when I was about 6, so about 5 or 6 years later. They all came back, apart from my gran and granddad, back to UK. But I had already lived in Ashburton, where I came from, for so long that they said, we'll just leave him there. He seems to be happy. So the next pivotal thing was joining the army,
Yeah.
I just turned 16 years old.
So
and
young.
It was young. Yeah, so everybody says that, but for me, I just came straight out of school. I had 2 weeks out of school. and I went straight into training in the army. Going into the army so young teaches you a lot of things. You know, you need to grow up quick. You know, you need to.
Yeah.
There's nobody doing your washing or doing your cooking or doing this and that. It's you. You know, you're doing your stuff. I then got posted to Germany when I was just under 18. I wasn't even 18. My 18th birthday, you have to sign the army papers, and I did that when I was over here in Germany. So that was a pivotal moment coming to Germany.
I bet. Yeah.
The next moment was going to war, I suppose. That was not 1990. 19 years old and getting sent to Saudi Arabia to fight in the first Gulf War. So you just go with the flow, right? And everybody's in the same boat. We're all there fighting. But when you come back, you know, afterwards, you look back and you reflect on it and you go, wow, you know, it wasn't normal. That's one of the things that, you know, followed me over the years. And obviously there was a lot of bad things happen there, and there was a lot of good camaraderie, and but there's a lot of pain and suffering when you go to these places, and that's one of the things that has opened my eyes over the years. Is, you know, war is good for if no one wins, you know, no ever.
Yeah, it's
quite weird, you know, because I mean back then you get told, you know, that you got to, if somebody comes there, you got to fire and shoot them. Yeah, okay. Yeah. Now I can't. Spiders, you know, they always get put outside, you know.
Yes.
They get a second chance. You know?
Yeah.
Nothing gets. I can't harm anything now. I don't know where they call that pacifist. It was just one of these things that came through the military service and through being at war. Yeah. You just learn that there's no reason to harm anyone or anything, really, because nobody gets anything out of it. And now it scares me every time these things coming up in the Ukraine now and in Russia. It doesn't matter who's right and who's wrong. You know, it doesn't matter. There's no reason in our day and age. There's no reason for people to be marching into different countries, right? Everything can be sorted out in some way or another. You know, I sound a bit preachy there, but it's just, I've been there. Right? I've been at the front. I've been where it was happening, and I know. What did it change, really? The Gulf War, it took this guy out of power, but there was other ways they could have done that. I know what we did was right. You know, it wasn't like we didn't do anything that was wrong, and we did everything that we did was to help people.
I've read that, you know, there's no right or wrong, but in the case of, like, you know, taking out somebody who's doing very dangerous things, there's a way to minimize the suffering in order to achieve the goal, to stop, you know, to maybe stop one person or one entity that's really causing harm. But how do we minimize pain without, you know, killing innocent people or killing anybody? Shouldn't we have a way with all that we know now? And I would think there's so much knowledge to be gained and wisdom from someone like you, Chris, like who's been like you said, you've been there, and you've come back and you survived it. In fact, I think stories like this are the ones we need to pay close attention to, analyze, research, and dig into again, and pull out when we are talking about war again, or we are expressing aggression when we could just be exchanging opinions and just finding a mutual ground instead of an angry fight that causes suffering.
The worst thing is, you know, the suffering, you know, it doesn't end there, does it? You know, it doesn't end for anybody at the time, you know, the war's over, but it doesn't end there. There's people, you know, got maimed and injured. They're suffering every day of their life. There's people, you know, that take it with them, you know, mentally. There's so many people that have been affected, and this is just one conflict from like how many hundreds since then, you know. You know, I watch the news, and, you know, you see things, you know, it pulls up a lot of stuff, you know, from the past when you watch stuff. But there's still a lot of crazy twats out there, you know. You've still got, you know, Kim Jong-un, and you've still got, you know, you've still got all these people and these dictators around the world.
By the way, he's a big fan of this podcast, by the way. So he's a little heartbeat listener. He may call the heartbeat hotline after this to leave a comment about your comment, but that's fine. No, that's fine.
Okay. Kim Jong, get your shit together, man.
Yeah, we'll have you on the podcast. Come on, and we could do a panel.
So anyway, let's pull it up a little bit again. But anyway, that's
keep the killing to the James Bond films, future films.
Yeah, that's it. Let's keep the killing to a minimum.
Yeah, but outside of reality, because I think sort of like movies and art, and I mean, I have a song called "I've Got a Gun," and it's really just as an artist, like I like the freedom to be able to kind of work through sort of like have these metaphors in art to represent these other complicated things in my life and express myself. But that's where it lives. I don't actually own a weapon. I would never want to harm anybody in that way, but it's just this kind of creative emotional outlet. And, sort of like reading, very dark children's stories. I think it allows children a place to work through in their imagination these things that live within all of us. There's a dark side in all of us, but we learn the difference between, like, in real life we treat people with as we would like to be treated, and we try to raise our conscientiousness about the things in the world and people. But there is still a place to have like massive fights in movies and to kind of go to the dark side. We don't want to have like everything. What would be the word to describe, like, where everything is just censored and like, super PG rated, and, that's no fun. Like,
no, of course. And it's yin and yang, isn't it? It's yin and yang. You can't have the dark without the light. You can't have the light without the dark. And that's the problem. And there will always be this in the world. It'll always be there.
I think that here's what I think the solution is. And I think, as you're a creator, I'm a creator. I think anytime you can, and it doesn't have to be something like a song or a movie or whatever, but anytime you can create something that brings somebody else joy, then I think that is a very valuable, meaningful purpose in life. Whether you just do something nice for somebody in the day, or you have a meaningful chat with a friend, give someone a call if you think they're going through a rough time, and you make time in your because everybody's busy. Make time in your busy life. It can be 5 minutes to just say, "Hey, I was thinking about you," and I just wanted to call and hope it makes you smile. But that's, I think, one way that you can be a positive light in the world. And you're doing that with your Bond collection. You're also in a band called Moby's Dick. And I tell people where they can find out more about you online, and is Moby's Dick going to be performing anytime soon, or are there any videos you want to promote? What's going on?
No, we've basically got into our
it's Moby's Limp Dick.
It's a bit at the minute, right? It is a bit at the minute. Yeah,
it's a little limp.
We've been castrated at the minute because the room where we used to practice was empty. I mean, nobody was allowed to, due to COVID, nobody was allowed to get together. So it was empty for at least a year. And we just started. We got back in. We cleaned it up, and we've been doing a bit of acoustic sets to get back into stuff. We did want to open up for the Stones next year, but hey, we're probably not going to make it. So we'll probably just have to do these little shitty town gigs that we've been doing for the last few years until the Rolling Stones call us again. And then, but I mean, it's just a bit of fun, right? It's just, we play songs that we like. It's hard being a cover band, doing stuff that you want to do, because there's not always songs in there that everybody knows. When they're going to play
Wagon Wheel.
No, Smoke on the Water,
Oh, okay.
But we don't play that. Just out of
Stairway to Heaven.
It's a bad song. No Stairway. No Stairway. We got big sign up saying no Stairway.
Gotcha.
It's just a hobby for us, We enjoy music, and it's a hobby. And if we have like 1 or 2 gigs a year, maybe 3, then we're cool,
This year, I was going to invite you to play our yearly gig in Eisenhüttenstadt, where you come up and play.
Not Eisenhüttenstadt. Isenhagen.
Fuck. Eisenhüttenstadt.
You're right. It's a complete different place.
Yeah, you're right.
I'm supposed to come there.
No, you're not invited to that one. I'm going to miss seeing you in Germany again this year. Sorry that we can't have you guest on bass guitar or bagpipes at our yearly What the fuck? Where were we playing?
Isn't
You piped us in with your bagpipes last time. That was an adventure.
Oh, brilliant. That was such good fun. You're the only artist. I mean, we've obviously met through the artist relations at Duesenberg, and you're the only artist that's ever asked me to come up on stage and play something with them. And that's really, it's really cool. It's I going back to the heart side of things. It's I mean, you've always been, every time we've met, you've always been very open about your down days and your hardships, and it's not all rosy. Everybody on the road have their bad days, and everybody at the beginning everybody's going, oh, we're going on tour again, and at the end everybody's going, when are we off fucking tour
when
again?
can we go home?
Where can we go home? It's always the same, and it's the same where you're filling arenas. I can tell you this. We've got artists that fill arenas. We've got artists that are very small venues, and they're all the same. It's all the same hardships. They're all away from their family. They've all left their kids at home. They've all got bills to pay and mortgages, and they've all got to do that. And it's at the end of the day, we're all the same. And that's what I've learned from this job is some people are more famous than other people, which isn't always a godsend. I think you personally, Christina, are very lucky to have Dale on your side. Number one,
I know.
You play together, right? You're married and you're traveling with your partner, with your musicians. I
always feel safe.
It's unbelievable, because that is, I mean, how many solo artists are there out there that are just doing these things that you're doing on their own, and they've got all this dead time on their own,
More than ever in our life, he's just been so supportive and like, what can I help you with? Let's sit down and do this. And he helps me prioritize. He knows me so well. He's like, I know she needs to exercise and that'll get her into the right headspace. I know she needs to eat. I know she, needs a massage or whatever. I mean, this sounds ridiculous, but like we try to do this for each other, but he really steps up. And I think part of the reason why he does that, I know, is one, because he really loves me, but he and I are a team, and everything we do, when one person, is struggling, the other one steps in to help lift them up. We have some things that we want to do on our own, and we respect that, and we want to see each other achieve those goals. And then we have our common goals that we really believe in. Like, we really believe we're here and we're supposed to be doing these things together, and that we're finding, as hard as it can be sometimes, like, we know we're finding joy in it. We love our work. Doesn't mean it's always easy, but it does bring us quite a joy. But you're right, Chris. I am lucky. He's lucky. And you are lucky to be.
No, you're lucky.
You're lucky to be our friends. You're lucky.
Anyway, so that's, I mean, I just know that it's a good team, and that's very important. I just have to say that, because we are the same. My wife's got a horse and she does that on her own. I've got my bond thing that we're part of together when we do like events and stuff, but most of the time I'm doing that on my own. So it's really important. And we've been together for 30 years. That's so important, I think, is to do things together, but do things separately.
Yeah. But Chris, you've given me a lot of your heart, a lot of chat.
I tell you what, it's good. Hey, Christina, it was a pleasure.
It
really was a pleasure. It was great, man. Let's hope that this thing goes, and we'll be back on track again to see you again soon. But I am a bit sad. I'm sad that you're not coming over this year. I would have liked to have seen you both, and we'll see where the journey takes us.
Yeah, and when there's another Bond film, we'll have to do a catch up.
Yeah, I'll have to explain everything to you again.
Yeah, okay. Please do. Welcome to the Heartbeat Hotline, 1-902-669-4769. I'm the host of A Chat with Heart podcast, Christina Martin, and I'm so excited you called. Leave me your question, a suggestion for the podcast, or a comment about this episode. Please be aware your message may be used on the podcast and social media. Tell me your name, where you're calling from, and it's also fine if you want to remain anonymous. Thanks for listening. Have a great fucking day. A Chat with Heart. Produced and written by me, Christina Martin. Co-produced and engineered by Dale Murray. Check out Dale's website, dalemurray.ca. The podcast theme song, Talk About It, was written by me and recorded by Dale Murray. You can find it on all the places you stream music. Production plans for this podcast and Season 1 are supported by the Province of Nova Scotia's Women in Business Implementation Fund and the Creative Industries Fund. Special thanks to Terrence Taylor for mentoring me on hosting this podcast and really digging deep with me on my production plans for Season 1, which, let's be honest, Terrence, ended up being more like well-needed psychotherapy for me. To Crystal Seeberger at Sensory Friendly Solutions, thank you from the bottom of my heart for helping me learn how to be a more inclusive, accessible, and sensory-friendly human. Visit my Patreon page to become a monthly or yearly supporter of this podcast and my music endeavors. If you're new to Patreon, it's a membership platform that helps creators get paid. Sign up at patreon.com/Christina Martin. For this to be a massive success and reach 7 billion people, I need you to share, rate, leave a review, and subscribe to A Chat with Heart on all the places you listen to podcasts. Wishing you, my little heartbeats, a great day.